12 by 400s, why I love them so much is because I get into an amazing flow, and it's a flow like no other. I feel like I'm entering the multiverse of track and field or running of sorts. It's not until I get to like the fourth, fifth one, and then I just lock in, and I feel like I could go forever. Why do you love it, Mike?
For me, it's psychologically the easiest of the hard sessions. So like 5 by 1 mile or harder interval sessions, they're tougher. It gets me from that initial base training, slower, easy running into the speed work. And because there's a rest after each 400, it psychologically feels easier. I tend to find that there's not too much stress on the body afterwards.
What you'll learn in this episode: how to do the workout perfectly, described down to the detail, and how to progress from the beginning to advancing it into your race training blocks, the importance of the rest period between each interval, how I use heart rate early in the season as a limiter, but not as a guide, when not to do this workout and how to avoid doing it wrong, and what a threshold is for runners. I'm Darren D. Lake Runs. I've been running since 1994. I've done a sub 3 hour marathon and a 10-hour Ironman finisher. And since 2012, I've been researching, experimenting, and talking to experts to figure out how to get 1% better in my training, racing, and life, all so that you don't have to do it. I'll be joined by a pro running coach, Mike Trees, aka Run.Energy on Instagram. He's an exercise scientist and still can run a 17-minute 5K in his mid-60s. Crazy, I know. He's the founder and head coach of Energy Running, which strive to help amateur and advanced runners run their best through training plans, one-on-one coaching, and assessments. Let's get into the conversation.
I'm a classic runner. I do these on the track. I don't do them on the road. Accelerate around the bend. I float down the straight. And then I think, okay, let's start to wind it up again. And I'm winding it up with 300, hit 300 meter mark, and it's okay, stride for home. And it's a great Vo2 Max session. It's about the right time frame that we need and intensity to improve your Vo2 Max. And also, it's perfect for 5,000 meters because you're doing 12 and a half laps for 5,000 meters.
Let's break it down so you can do, someone wants to get into it, they could do 6 by 400s. They can then up it up to 16 by 400s if they get really, fit and they want to start like really stressing themselves. So like break down the core of what the actual workout is, the rest, the time, etc. What you're trying to do. So break that all down.
So I'm trying to develop my threshold, my running economy. I'm trying to be able to, what we say, deflect the curve to the right, run a little bit quicker without building up lactate in the blood. And by doing this over a period of 4 to 6 weeks, we've found that I'm able to buffer the lactic and able to run and cope with a higher volume of lactate in the body without slowing me down. So if you were just to run a straight 5K without doing this session, you will say, I'm going to pick a magic number of 30 minutes. But then you do this session for 6 weeks, you'll find that you haven't increased your VO2 max specifically in that short period of time. It will contribute down the line, but it's making you more economical. You're able to cope with running at a certain pace using less oxygen as you're running. It's becoming more efficient with the way you're running, and that's why I like it. And I find that the best is a 2-to-1 ratio, work to rest. So again, just for simple maths, I find that if you're running the 400 in 80 seconds, I know that's going to be fast for some people, slow for some. I would take 40 seconds rest. And that brings me down to a nice 2-minute circle. And so, I'd try and hit all the intervals at the same pace, each one, and keep the rest the same for each one. So I'm getting literally, 40 seconds rest for the 80 seconds of work time that I'm doing. And that's over time what I've discovered is the most effective way of helping the athletes. And then again, I've got 30 odd years. Each time we talk, it gets longer, maybe 35 years of coaching. I found that, I've got a lot of experience, and I know that most of my athletes do really well on this session. So I know it works. It's totally different from 6 by 400, which I would give to a 1,500 meter runner. And I would give them 3 minutes rest initially on that so that they can go absolutely all out. And that's not about working their threshold. That's about absolute lactate tolerance, being able to run at a fast pace, which is what you're good at, with massive amount of lactate swirling around in their bodies, a really high volume. So that's different from a lactic threshold. It's a a maximum lactic tolerance session is 6x400 with a bigger rest. So you can see by varying the rest period and the number, we change in the session.
So this workout, even though this workout is pretty much applicable. I was an 800 runner and I did this workout. So it's really an interesting workout. It's very adaptable and very it could be used in a lot of different situations. So let's say you're a 5K runner all the way up to a marathon. Like you're doing all of them. What would the pace be for you to do this? Like, would it be your current 5K fitness pace? Would it be your 10K pace? So I know there's a lot to go with this, and my questions are always loaded. There's always a lot happening. But let's say like you just want to do this workout in the middle of the year. Where in general should the pace fall? And here's another part. Should it be based on RPE, pace, or heart rate?
Well, I'll use me as an example. So if I come in and I want to do a 5K, I'll do this session the first time on RPE and just go in and run the session just to see where I'm at. So I'll go around.
So what's the RPE? Is it like 8 out of 10?
So the RPE is interesting. It's where I perceive my threshold to be, which I don't put a number on it. I've run so long, I know where my threshold is, which is probably around, and everyone's 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 6. It's all different for everyone. It's a number that you perceive. So I set off at a pace that I perceive I can maintain for 12 efforts. And through my experience, I'm pretty good at that.
What is a threshold? What is threshold?
Threshold is if I'm running any quicker than that, I won't maintain that pace for the whole 12 reps.
I'm a beginner runner. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
What you have to do is you will find out through experience what a pace is you can hold for the reps. And it's all about experience. So what we're talking, even for a novice runner, will find it difficult. When you get to learn the terminology, you start to learn more and more and understand the body. So that we've thrown these terms around that I try my hardest on Instagram to explain it and get it down to the lowest denominator so that everyone can understand it without getting away from the science. But we do tend to put in nerves, like you said, oh, that's Z5. Well, for a start, in England, no one will understand Z5 because it's zone 5 or it's Z5. But there's so many different things that we can differentiate. So we've got to constantly define the terms, which is where it's good for you to keep picking me apart. Might take it back a bit. So 12 400s. Let's go back to basics. I'll start off the beginning of the session or the beginning of the season at a pace that I think I can maintain that pace for all 12. Now, I'll get to the finish of the session. Once I've finished, I'll think, you know what? That was a little easy. I'll up it next time. Then the next session, I'll go a little bit quicker and I'll think, whoop, that was a little bit hard. I slowed down at the end. Then I'll look at them and think, well, week 1, I was running 85 seconds for each 400. Week 2, I started off at 78 and ended up at 85. So I think the pace I need to be aiming at is around about 83 seconds per 400. And by default, I sort of define it by week 3. I pretty much know where I need to be aiming at. And then I set myself a number that I'm looking at and trying to achieve as a goal. And then from there, I can then extrapolate that if I'm running around about 83 seconds per lap, I'm probably in that 17-minute zone for 5K with a bit of training. So I already know, because I've done it so often, I know what each lap equates to per kilometer, per 5K. And beginners and novice runners, this is why we need coaches in essence. It takes them a lot longer to equate to where they're at. But I don't look at heart rate while I'm running. I look at it when I finish to see what it was, because I find it fascinating to see what the maximum heart rate is, what it's doing, what I'm at, and where my threshold is. But I run to feeling all the time, and I look at the clock and try and push it a little bit and work on strategies to keep me at the right pace I need to be going. So yeah, RPE is possibly the most important. And at the risk of dominating the conversation here, I just want to say that when you're racing, it doesn't matter how high your heart rate goes, so long as you can maintain that pace. So RPE is more important than heart rate. You might suddenly find that you reach a new level of training and can maintain a higher heart rate, or your your stroke volume of the heart becomes so good that you need a lower heart rate to go at the pace you need to go at. So often people get too focused on heart rate. I think it's important, but I think the feeling is way, way more important than the actual heart rate when you're running.
Right now is the part where I go, hey, if you're not feeling this, make sure you subscribe, rate, share it out with your friends about how amazing this is, rah, 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 rah. All right. While you should go out and do that anyway, how about I actually give you something that will help you? Is the running, health and fitness, and endurance sport internet too much sometimes? Is it too much conflicting content on how to train right? Or you just don't have time to read and watch the latest trends on how to, carb cycle for your next marathon? Don't worry. I'll take care of that for you by showing you how to train, race, and live 1% better consistently. To do this, just sign up for my free newsletter, OPB. I figure out this whole 1% better thing so you don't have to by scouring the endurance sports deepest and darkest corners of the internet. Go to dlatecreates.com/news, all spelled the normal way, to be inspired and motivated on the regular. Let's get back into it. All right, now we're going to go back to the rest. So how important is the rest? Because I remember, so this workout was prescribed to me when, my second year of running. I started running 800, so they prescribed it to 800, 1,500 guys and women. And, it was the 2-to-1 rest. And I never understood the science behind it. I then started reading up on Jack Daniel's Vo2 Max formula and all his science, which we both agree that he's the OG, the original gangsta of all that. He kind of came up with the whole Vo2 Max, and his formulas are really dead on. So, but he talks about the rest of was it him? No, it was actually this other guy. But he referenced Jack Daniel's on this, and it's that you don't want the rest to be too short. And you also don't want to be too long. So that 2-to-1 ratio is perfection. And you really don't want to be any more than a few seconds, plus or minus, because you don't get the effects of the workout. Is that true? Do you want to add to that?
To a point. You don't want too much rest because you'll be running at a pace that's unrealistically fast for the target. Say you're trying to do a 5K I know these times are fast for a lot of people. We'll say 16 minutes 40 because I know the numbers on that. That's 80 seconds per 400 meters. So you need to be running around 80 seconds. Now, I can run an 80-second 400, no problem. If I take 3 minutes rest and run another one, I can run another one in 80 seconds. But it's unrealistic. The rest to work ratio is too long. If I do 80 seconds at first and then only give myself 10 seconds rest, I'm not allowing the heart rate to drop down to let me recover. So what we need is enough time to let the heart rate drop down to stimulate the developments to take place. So I find that initially that 2-to-1 ratio is good. Now, if my target is 1640 and I'm hitting these numbers quite happily, I'll actually shorten the rest period. Or it might not be me. I'm saying it could be my athletes I'm working with. I might say, okay, we're going to take 10 seconds or 15 seconds off the rest period because you're hitting the numbers too easily. And if they're still hitting the numbers, then we say, okay, this target's obviously a little bit too easy for you. I'll raise the speeds that you should be running at and keep adjusting it. But towards the end of a block of work, I often do cut that rest period down because if I'm trying to run 1640 in the track, it means I have to put 12 and a half laps together at 80 seconds. I don't get the luxury of 40 seconds rest each time I'm going round. So the rest period is good to stimulate the development. Some people say, yes, you should run quicker than that. Well, no, I disagree from the point of view that your body becomes efficient at what it does most. If your legs are used to running at 80-second pace, they'll become pretty efficient and you get used to that pace. So what I will do instead is I'll reduce the rest period to make it tougher on them. And then you still say, but you're getting a rest. How do you do it on race day? Well, a taper is amazing, allowing the body to recover. You're doing these tired. You've had a run the day before. You've probably been weight training. There's lots of other things going on in your life. But you give someone a nice week or 10 days taper period going into a race, and they can actually raise their game a lot and maintain that 80-second pace without any rest at all. It's a VO2 improving session. So it will help improve your VO2 max. I would say a 5K is probably more specific because you're going all out. The actual race is a more specific VO2 max session. But any work of this sort of this time around about that 20-minute mark will help develop your stroke volume, your VO2, and ultimately your VO2 max.
Is this at all even a tempo workout? Because I know we're doing a podcast, we're doing an episode on tempo runs. Because I know you say it basically is a threshold workout, but threshold, as we said earlier, is kind of subjective and it's kind of unclear in gray areas.
A threshold, to me, is a pace you can maintain for up to an hour with training. This is not a pace you can maintain up to an hour. So this is, so with threshold, again, imagine it's snowing. And I'm going to give you an analogy here. So with lactate, it's snowing and it's above freezing and the snow hits the ground and it melts. So that's possibly where we want to be on a threshold run. Just a little bit of snow and it's not touching the ground. But if we go a bit quicker, the snow starts to come down harder. And then it hits the ground. And then it starts to stay on the ground. It's still above freezing, but we're really pushing it now. So the snow's coming down really hard. And this is the lactate building up inside your body. It's making it harder and harder to run quick because the ground's slippy now. You're going all over the place with all the snow. But if it stops snowing, that's us slowing down. The lactic slows down the build-up, it disintegrates, it disappears, and we're able to go quicker again. And so a tempo run is like it's snowing. For me, a tempo run that you maintain an hour, it's snowing, it's hitting the ground, it's melting, it's not lying around. But these 12x400s, you're probably 5 beats above threshold to stimulate it. And so there's a lot more lactic build-up, but you're getting a 40-second rest to allow your heart rate to go back below threshold to recover and your body to absorb and dissipate some of the lactate in the body and then come back and go again. With a tempo, you've not got a rest in there at all. So you've got to be careful about how much lactate you build up because you're not allowing any chance for it to disappear. So we find that the body when you're racing is best at this homeostasis, this even level all the way through.
All right, so let's flip it to the inverse side of things. Like when's a bad time to do it?
I wouldn't really put this in the base period because it's a little bit quick. It probably builds a bit too much lactate and stops you working the aerobic training and getting the overall training volume in that you want. Also, when you run faster, you do naturally come more onto your toes running. The calves will fatigue. So if you introduce this too soon, this speed work, you're going to get potentially problems with Achilles, calf muscles, just generally problems with tight muscles the next day. So you're not going to enjoy running the next day as much because things ache. And then potentially if those go on for 2 or 3 days, you're missing other training elsewhere because you're just recovering from the session. So if you work too hard, you could be running downsides. Hopefully, if you've done a good base training, been in the gym and strengthened everything up, it won't happen. But if you go straight into this without the right preparation, that's the downsides of it. But varying it, for most of us, we're so far away from our potential that let's just get in the right ballpark. And the reason that we write our training plans and people say, I did a PB, it's just getting that structure into your training and working along simple physiological guidelines. And we can vary it a lot. The body's not that great at remembering, so long as we're getting in the right ballpark, we're going to go forward. So if you want to vary it because you're bored, silly with 12x300, do 15 by, or 12x400, do 15 by 300. Or do 10 by 500, maybe a bit far, but you know what I mean. You can vary it a little bit, so it's not going to be a big change. But psychologically, I like that. I mean, I might go at the track and say, I really can't face doing my 12 by 400 today. But 300 just seem that little bit easier. I'm going to do my 300, jog 100, 300, jog 100. It's essentially the same session. But psychologically, I feel so much happier to have varied it. So varying it is good. And I do like to do that with the athletes I do, rather than just say, here's the same session this week, next week, the week after. They look for something different as well. So variation is good. So that's not an issue. And obviously, you can't take 12 400s and then change it to 12 by 1 mile. It's variation within that rough theme of around about 5,000 meters of work.